Well, hello and welcome to Kopernik Friday Night Live Stream. I'm Drew Desker. I'm the director of Kopernik, and glad to have you join us this evening for our program on alternative energy. For those that might be watching for the first time, Kopernik is up at the Kopernik Observatory in Vestal, New York, and we normally have our programs on Friday nights up at Kopernik, but due to the pandemic, we have pivoted and have been doing everything on a live stream now. So it's been great to engage with people. As we finally get into the program itself, you'll be able to ask questions in the chat, in the YouTube chat, and at the end of the presentation, I'll convey those questions to our presenter, and she'll be able to reply to that. So I just want to give you little teasers of what's coming up here. So again, tonight is talk on alternative energy. Next Friday we're going to take a break, but then the following Friday after that, April 23rd, we have actually a real interesting program. There's a local Union Endicott graduate, Daniel Krisak, who again grew up in this area, ultimately went to school for, I believe, geology, but ultimately ended up in Pasadena, California, working for a subcontractor to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he has been working for a very amount of time on various cameras that are on missions that JPL has sent out into space. He's worked on Curiosity camera, on the Juno camera, and including the Perseverance rover, the one that just landed back in February. So that's on April 23rd. April 30th, we'll have another camera system, but more on Earth. Victor Lamoureux, who is a professor at SUNY Broome, will talk about trail cams with a talking entitled "What Goes There." So that'll be a fun one to see what people have been able to capture with their trail cams. And then on May 7th, we've got a BU professor, John Swirk, talking about alchemy and the birth of modern science. So it'll be interesting to see how we came out of an alchemy environment into what we now know as modern science. Then later in May, we'll have somebody talking about cicadas. We'll do some Skywarn training. So those are some Friday night programs that are coming up. But we're going to go back a little bit. On April 24th, we're going to run our third annual Race to the Stars. It's a 5K road race that starts and ends here at Kopernik. For those of you who have ever been up at Kopernik, it's not down the steep part. It's on a nice rolling hills part. So that'll be good. We'll so that's on April 24th. Also, you should register either today or tomorrow, because after tomorrow, the registration fee goes up. So you can run it, you can walk it, you can stroll it. So it'll be a good time, and it'll help support Kopernik. And then the two more things I'm just going to mention to you. Normally in June we do a thing called Rocket Fest, where families come up and build those little Estes rockets and then launch them and recover them. We're taking a hybrid approach this year, where that we're going to have you pick up your rocket kit, in the beginning of May. You'll then work on it at home, but we're not going to just send you out by yourself. So in subsequent weekends, we will actually have some Zoom consultation sessions, so that if you've got a question on how this thing is supposed to go together, you can actually, we'll provide a Zoom platform that you can come in and show us what you got and say, oh, nope, you got to turn that around. It's in backwards, or whatever. So we'll help you out. And then on May 22nd, we'll do our actual launch up here. And then finally, we are about to announce our summer camps for both in-person and some virtual summer camps. So stay tuned to our website. So let's now transition into our program tonight. I've been fortunate to know Gay for a number of years, and I'm personally a huge supporter of alternative energy, and this is Gay's life. And I said, who better to talk about where we are? And the thing that's great is that this technology is constantly changing, and so what we knew even 5 years ago has now improved. And so I'm going to just turn this right over to Gay, And thank you again for presenting for us today. So over to you. Oh, you're muted.
Unmute.
There you go.
All right. And then do our thing. Make sure this is working. Okay. And see this. Okay. So, hello everybody. Thank you for attending our little program tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on in solar energy. So who am I? Well, I've been running a solar energy company, ETM SolarWorks, for 33 years. This is our 33rd year in business. And things have changed a lot in that time. When I started, I was the only installer in New York, or in upstate New York, and there were only off-grid systems being installed then, and only small ones at that. So a lot has gone on since then. Just a little bit about how I got started. So my background is in high energy physics. I smashed up protons at Fermilab for a few years back in the 80s, looking for esoteric subatomic particles. And in fact, I have a whole workshop on that. Maybe we can do that at some future time. But in 1988, I started a company called Extraterrestrial Materials, which is what ETM is short for. And we did aerospace consulting work. So we didn't do solar right off the bat. We did work on, for example, design of the lunar prospector, which actually did go to the moon in 1998. It was looking for water at the pole, so ice in permanently shadowed craters. And it actually found that. Later on, another lunar probe, about 10 years later, confirmed that finding. So there is ice up there, and there's quite a lot of it, which is good because you would hate to have to haul all your water from Earth if you want to do something on the moon, right? Water's kind of heavy. So that was our main claim to fame. We did also do some designs on asteroid mining. That was kind of our first idea, to mine near-Earth asteroids. So we did some design work on that, and we also studied space debris, which back then was starting to be a problem. Now it's an even bigger problem. In fact, it's going to be such a big problem. I think there's going to be a business opportunity for a debris cleanup in space. So if you're looking for a money-making opportunity in space, I think that's a good bet. Just think of all those Starlink satellites that are going up. But in the early 90s, we did some work for NASA on a thing called space solar power. And this is the idea of putting a giant solar array in geosynchronous orbit, where you get sun 24 hours a day, and you beam the power back to Earth with wireless power transmission, which is nothing more than microwave transmission using microwaves of the same type that is made in your microwave oven. So the exact same magnetrons that are in your microwave oven could be used to beam that power back to Earth. And in spite of fears about beams, it's really a very diffuse beam. Its power density is only 1/4 of the power density of natural sunlight, and microwaves are non-ionizing radiation, so they don't cause cancer. Microwaves can heat you up if the power density is high enough, but for this, power density is so low it wouldn't do that. So it's actually a pretty cool idea, and NASA had studied it in the 70s, and they were revisiting it in the early 90s. The technology for all of it exists. So the power transmission, Bill Brown, he brought wireless power transmission to a pretty high art. You might know that the idea of wireless power transmission came from Nikola Tesla, but it was actually perfected by Bill Brown. And And so, that was a really cool idea to get baseload solar power. The difficulty was that we didn't have any good space transportation. And, we still are struggling with that. And that's pretty, at that time, that's a fairly expensive endeavor because we really didn't know, you have to think about it. You got to build something large up there. You've got to transport stuff to the place, to Geo. You've got to house people or construction people and robots and all this to build something like that. So it's it's a challenge. Like I said, when we started, we were thinking about the asteroids as a way to make a buck. We thought about space solar power. But just there was all these barriers to doing those things in a sort of a money making way. Of course, there's research going on, and all the Mars missions. They're not money making things, right? They're science things. So, shout out to SpaceX for working on fixing the first problem of space transportation. They're making good progress on that. So there's hope. But at one point, we realized that there is one resource of space that you don't have to go into space to get. It comes to you, and that would be solar energy. There's a lot of solar energy falling upon us all the time. And in fact, as soon as we had that idea, we got involved with the solar array up at Kopernik. At that time, I had a friend who had promoted that project and got it going, and I just had this vision. I'm walking outside. There's all this free sunlight falling on us from this, from out there, and then this is an extraterrestrial resource, and the Kopernik solar array was going to capture some of that. So I actually volunteered to help on the installation of this to find out how it was done. So I call that my first PV, my first photovoltaic system that I worked on.
And it's still working and still doing the job.
Yeah, and and you see how big that is. You've been up there. That's only 4 kilowatts. A 4 kilowatt array today would be half that size. That's a testament to the improvement of efficiency of converting light to electricity. Well, over time, I started to realize that the whole issue of renewable energy is important because we have to stop burning things. The way we get our electricity, even today, the majority of the ways we get it is by burning something. We burn coal, we burn natural gas, not so much oil anymore, although there are still places that do that. And all that burning, carbon dioxide comes off of that. Some things like natural gas are obviously cleaner than coal, but to get the natural gas, you gotta drill for that, and that means you're going to have leakage of methane into the atmosphere, and methane is a very strong greenhouse gas. So we really have to stop burning fossil fuel. Climate change is upon us, and it is extremely expensive and getting more expensive by the day. Just for us here locally, our flooding in 2011 cost us $500 million. $500 million. Where do you think that money comes from? Well, it comes from your tax dollars to clean up that mess. So it's important to get off of burning things, and it turns out that the technology for wind and solar will allow us to do that. It'll allow us to do that easily and economically. And here's some reasons why. So I'm gonna focus on solar, but wind energy is also a big part of the equation of renewable energy. The solar resource, one of the things I like about solar is that the resource is fairly uniform across the country. And it is huge, absolutely huge. This yellow square on this slide is the amount of solar energy falling on the land area of Earth. Only the land, not counting the water. Okay, and if you put a number on it, It's 201,480 trillion kilowatt hours per year. So a kilowatt hour, that's a unit of energy. That is what the utility bills you for on your electric bill, are kilowatt hours. Compared to the forever supply of fossil fuel. Okay, so this yellow square is every year. Every year, this is how much energy from the sun you get on the land area of Earth. And just to put it in perspective, that amount of solar energy is 1,400 times more than the yearly world energy consumption. So even if we increase our energy use, for example, we're getting more electric vehicles, need more electricity, it's not going to be a problem. Not only that, there's about 5 billion years of solar energy left on our particular star. So, as you know, the more I looked into that, the clearer it became to me that ultimately solar power was going to win out, just because of the huge resource. To be more specific about the resource, of course, it is pretty uniform, but not across the world. I mean, there are definitely places like up in Alaska that aren't as sunny as the continental United States. But this map of the continental United States kind of shows you that it is fairly uniform. You know, for the whole eastern half of the country, gets about the same amount of sun. The Southwest gets more, but it doesn't get double. It gets about maybe 40% more than the eastern half there. And Binghamton specifically, we get 20% more sunlight than the sunniest place in Germany. And I'm bringing up Germany because Germany, they had been the world leader in solar power deployment up until very recently. I think China might be beating them out now. So we have, the message here is that we have plenty of sun. There's no problem there. It's when I first started talking about solar in Binghamton, that was the question I got the most often. Well, do we have enough sun? We have plenty of sun. Now, in addition to that, we have plenty of space. So we have plenty of sun, we have plenty of physical space to put our solar cells. That little dot on the globe there is the area of photovoltaic solar cells that you would need to power the entire world. That little dot. And the little red square on US there is the area of solar cells that you would need to power the entire United States of America. That 12,000 square kilometers is equal to the Nevada test site and range. That's how big that is. Now, you wouldn't put it all in one spot. You spread it all out, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And there is a caveat here, which is that Earth-based solar power, unlike space solar power, Earth-based solar power, we have day and night. So we don't have solar falling on our solar panels all the time. And therefore, we may need some storage to serve our loads. There's other ways of handling that too, but probably storage is going to win out there. Another question that comes up is intermittency. And I hear that nowadays, now that people know a little more about solar, I hear this question more often. You know, the problem that the sun is not always out. There's cloudy times, there's nighttime, the wind isn't always blowing. So what do you do about that? Well, it turns out that in addition to adding storage, which is sort of the first thing people think about, what's happened is that the cost of solar cells is gone down so much that you can afford to build solar power plants that are more than you need when you have sun in order to get more energy out of it when there's not as much sun. So and also to charge batteries. And the other thing is the more, and now in wind, the more of something you add to your grid, the more of these things you have, it sort of starts to smooth out and it doesn't look as intermittent. So if you have lots and lots of wind turbines, lots and lots of solar arrays, some of them are always working, some of them are not working, but the more of them you have, the less intermittent it is. And now what about storage? This is something that's starting to happen in a big way, and our particular community is getting ready to host a battery manufacturer down here in Endicott. So first of all, I want us, when we think about storage, think about things, not just batteries. There are some other things. There's more than just one thing. Americans are so good at looking for the one magic thing that's going to solve all their problems. Europeans are a little different. They take the incremental approach. Well, let's do this, 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 and this. So when I got my first energy efficient refrigerator, it had 4 or 5 different things that they had done. It was made in Europe to make it efficient. It wasn't one magic thing. So we got to stop this one thing thinking. So here's some other things that can be considered storage that are maybe you haven't thought of. So, for example, air conditioning by making ice when the sun shines, and then using ice or chilled water to air condition your building. You can store ice pretty well. Make hydrogen with photovoltaics to split water. Right? Split water, make hydrogen. Take the hydrogen, use it in a fuel cell, you get water. So that's a really clean cycle. Heat rocks and soil with excess solar heat in the summer and use it in the winter. There's actually a place, I think it's in Norway, that's actually doing that. Phase change materials. Demand response, i.e. control your loads, set back thermostats, all that kind of stuff. Pumped hydro, there's places where you can do that. And then, of course, there's batteries, and there's a variety of kinds of batteries. So it's just not one thing. There's a lot of things we can do. And some of these things are already being done, and now we're just going to do more of them. And I've also heard people saying, well, the solar and wind can never add up to baseload. I think they're wrong. We're at a couple of percent of solar for powering the United States right now, and now that we're in the single digits as opposed to less than the single digits, you're going to see it grow a lot. I mean, dramatically. With our storage plus overbuild, we could easily get to powering most of our loads with solar and wind, and maybe we'll do space solar power too at some point. That would be pretty cool as we as we learn more about how to do things in space. So eventually, could very well be that solar and wind will, and maybe a few other cool renewable technologies will completely take over. People used to think that our demand for electricity would grow forever, but then energy efficiency happened, and it stopped growing. Energy efficiency. It tipped that growth curve right over. When I first started doing solar, before I even did it on my own house, I did some energy efficiency measures, and these 4 things: converting my lighting, getting an Energy Star refrigerator, line drying my clothes instead of using the dryer, and eliminating those vampire loads, that cut my use by a factor of 5. Just doing those things. So energy efficiency, pretty powerful. In fact, there's a variety of things. This is my laundry list of things we can do to completely get off fossil fuel. And so not only for our buildings or our houses, but also for one of the big bugaboos in New York is we have a big heating load in New York. So we heat with a lot of natural gas. We can convert to heat pumps, and that's starting to happen so fast that it's hard for me to keep up with just how fast it's happening. But there's other things going on. The electric vehicle revolution is happening. All of the manufacturers of electric vehicles are saying this is what we're going to make. We're going to stop making gas-fired vehicles. We're going to make electric vehicles. I've been jumping up and down for years about using more video teleconferencing. And oddly, the pandemic has caused that to finally happen. Now, we had the technology to do it 30 years ago, but now it's finally happening. It's so funny how things like that just, we could do it, but we didn't do it. Public transportation. How come we're not using public transportation? I don't know. So there's various things we can do to really completely get off fossil fuel. I'm gonna do something here with my sidebar. Okay. So I mentioned heating. Of course, first thing you can do about heating is reduce heat loss. Call the insulation man; he'll help you with that. If you have icicles, you got heat loss, and so think of icicles. Whenever you see icicles, what you're actually seeing is dollars floating up out of your building. You're losing money to get rid of those icicles. Insulate and seal up your building, your house. And then air source heat pumps. These are one of the reasons I like these is because you can retrofit with these without changing anything else about your heating system. You don't have to take out your existing heating system. You can just put these in. They're ductless. The compressor goes outside, so the ductless thing, the indoor heat exchanger thing, hangs on the wall. So really easy to do. And this is just happening. All our solar customers are asking us about these, so we started installing these as well as solar. And okay, so let's go to solar technologies. Of course, I mentioned already solar electricity, which are made of solar panels. Solar panels are made of solar cells. Solar cells are made of silicon, and they convert light to electricity directly. You get DC electricity out of those. Whereas solar hot water heating, those are boxes with copper tubing in them, and you run antifreeze through that to a heat exchanger to heat your hot water. That works really great for domestic hot water. These days, most of our installations are solar electric systems. For a long time, it would have been a lot cheaper to heat your water with solar hot water heating, but now the cost of photovoltaics has gotten so low that it's not really, it doesn't really matter. It's the same cost. All right, and solar power is not just for hippies anymore. There are big companies that are solarizing their themselves as fast as they can for various reasons. But think about it for a minute. These companies are not doing, for the most part, they're not doing it because they want to be green. They may say that, but their prime motive, trust me, their prime motive is saving money. And they are getting into this more and more because here's what's happened to solar cell cost. Okay, so in 1977, the cost of a 4-watt solar cell, which was something that's about 2 inches in diameter, was $300. All right, and now now it's less than $1 for the same thing. So the cost went down a lot. Why did the cost go down a lot? Mass production. Almost anything that you can think of that is manufactured, every time you double the production of it, the cost goes down 20%. So all you have to do to lower cost is mass production. Yes, new technology is nice, but if you take a good technology and you mass produce it, the cost is going down. In fact, today, the cost of if you build a solar power plant, so you build something fairly large, like 100 megawatts, then you are talking about a cost per kilowatt hour with no incentives, no subsidies, that is less than the cost of coal kilowatt hours. Okay, so solar kilowatt hours, solar electricity has now become the one and only energy source that does not require a subsidy, and it is the cheapest source in history. In some ways, we have won. We've won. Now all we have to do is deploy. Now I want to tell you a little side story here about that. Recently, a school realized that they could do something with this savings. So it's one thing to talk about electricity being cheaper, about savings on your house, and this all seems, like, yeah, that's true, but it might take a long time to realize those savings, and people are a little fuzzy on what that really means to their wallet. Well, here's a school that discovered exactly what it meant to their wallet. And they did something really amazing with that idea. So they installed a large solar array, had about 1,500 panels, to power the school. This is a school in Arkansas. And their first year, they saved so much money on electricity costs that they were able to give their teachers $15,000 raises. You know, these teachers were making around $45,000, and they got raises to the tune of $15,000. They took the savings, the amount of money they did not have to pay the utility because they had solar power, and they gave the teachers raises. They turned around their whole budget from having a deficit of $250,000 to a surplus of $8 million. Okay, so not only did they have the vision to go solar, but they took the savings and used it to make a difference by paying the teachers more. And I thought that was just brilliant. So that just really brings home, you know, the idea that, hey, this is less expensive. So not only is it better for the environment, but it's less expensive, and it can really make a difference for your house, your business, your school, your community. You might have noticed that a couple of schools around here are jumping on that bandwagon. They are building large solar arrays to power the school. I think Maine and Endwell, there's just got going, and Johnson City is also planning that. So, you know, given that the savings have been proven, and some of like this school district in Arkansas is using those savings for something really amazing, we're going to see a lot more of that. All right, so this is just a little summary of what I was saying there about the cost. Of course, any kind of power plant will generate electricity more cheaply if it's big. You get some economies of scale if you build something big. So for your house, you know, your cost per kilowatt hour with no subsidy is something like 18 cents. But you build a 500 megawatt power plant, and now it's 4 cents. You know, so for years, people have been trying to compare the home system to the utility cost, which makes no sense because utilities all have big power plants. Nevertheless, we'll see in a minute here, there are some reasons to keep doing the small ones. But first, I want to just get into some tech talk here about solar cells, because I know there's some techies on here. So solar cells are made of silicon. Silicon is the second most common element in the Earth's crust. Sand is made of silicon dioxide. So when someone comes up to you and says, well, what about all that toxic stuff in solar cells? Just look at them like they got two heads. You know, like go to the beach. It's what you find on the beach, silicon. All right. The other things that are in it are there's some very small amounts of dopants that make it into a semiconductor, and there's some copper and some solder. The solar cells are made into panels, which the front of a solar panel is glass, back is some kind of plastic material, the frame is aluminum. Okay, so there's nothing like horrible and toxic in these things. And now what the industry is doing is we are working on recycling solar panels. We now have enough of them out there, and they've been around long enough that some kinds are being, you know, some places you need to replace them after 20 or 30 years. Yeah, they last a long time, but eventually you want to replace them. And you don't want to just throw them in the landfill. The silicon is refined silicon, which takes energy to do, so you want to capture that back. So that's a move that's afoot right now, is the recycling. And then if you really want to get technical, the semiconductor, this is something that I feel like we should be teaching this in high school at this point. How does a semiconductor work? It's basically a material which has a two is silicon. One side has a dopant that gives you excess electrons, and the other side gives you a deficit of electrons. So basically you have an electric field inside that material. And when a photon of light comes along and disrupts an electron, that electron is in a field, so it feels a force, and therefore it moves. So it's really simple. The solar cell happens to be the simplest semiconductor device. It's usually one p-n junction. Some solar cells have 2 or 3, but most of them are 1. As compared to your computer chip. Now, your computer chip has, I don't know, 500 million of these things in it. It's a very complicated semiconductor device compared to a solar cell. So solar cell is really simple. Okay, so some kinds of systems. When we started, we did standalones or off-grids. And this was made of a array of solar modules that charged a battery bank. The Kopernik one did not do that. It was actually a grid-connected one. But back then, though, that was really rare. Most of them were not that. The vast majority were charging a battery bank. And we did a lot of camps and cabins, people that did not have electricity from the grid. So this is our very first one we did in 1994, a cabin in Deposit, and that is still operational. So that speaks to the longevity and low maintenance of solar energy systems. This is our second one in Hancock, also still working. And here's an example of a system really out in the middle of nowhere where you could not get utility power up there. This is on a fire tower in the Adirondacks that has a radio repeater with it that the Parks Department and the police use. And this little building over here is where the batteries are. In modern times, I've been going over to Haiti and helping them solarize because, you know, Haiti has a lot of sun. They have more sun in the wintertime than we have in the summer. So, and yet they have a lot of trouble with not having electricity. So I've been over to our little village that in Grand Saline and getting them solar power for their classroom. They had a group of people there that wanted to have some computers in the classroom, but computers need electricity. So we brought them some solar electricity, and they now have a water treatment system that was donated to them, and we're going to build a bigger solar array to power that. They have suffered for a couple of years here along, they sort of limped along with some generators for their water treatment. It just shows what a pain in the butt generators are. And for them, fuel is very expensive and it's an ongoing expense. All right, so those are kind of the off-grids. In 1997 in New York, the governor signed a bill for net metering. Net metering, I'll go to this slide first. So net metering is where you don't have batteries. You basically use your solar electricity. So you have a solar array, it feeds an inverter, which converts a DC to AC, because the electricity out of a solar panel is DC or direct current, converts it to AC, and then it feeds your house directly. But what if you don't have a lot of stuff turned on and you can't use it all? Well, what net metering allows you to do is turn your meter backward and get credit at the retail rate from the utility. And then later, when you don't have sun, like at night or in wintertime, you can use those credits. All right, so this is a kind of system that didn't have batteries, which made it less expensive and simpler and lower maintenance. Okay, so this is just a couple of designs of these kinds of systems, just to see how simple it is. This is a system that has the inverters built into the panels. So all you have is down at your circuit box, you don't really have anything except maybe a disconnect switch, wiring going right to your circuit breaker in your box. This is another one that has DC wiring up on the roof and then feeding a single inverter down in your garage or next to your circuit box. So those are a couple of kinds of pure grid ties or grid connected systems. And where do you put your panels? Well, you can put them on the roof. You can put them out in the yard. Most residential customers around here, it's about half and half. If you live in town, it's probably going to be on the roof because most people in town don't have a big yard. A lot of people out in the country have them out in the yard. There's there's a farm here out in the country. I have a big roof on a barn, so they were able to get a lot of solar panels up. As contrasted by this customer, who's right in downtown Binghamton, and we did a lot of tricky stuff to fit as many panels as we could up on his garage roof. This is another farm out in the town of Maine, McRae Farm. You might know them. See them at the farmers market. We have a good size system. So this is just to give you an idea of what some of these look like. But what if you really have no place to put your solar panels? There are situations where either there's too much shade or just not enough room on your roof or in your yard. Well, then you go and you get into community solar. So community solar, you probably heard about this. What this is where someone else hosts your solar panels. And so now we have one of these projects, and we just basically rented a roof on a big storage facility in Johnson City, and then people could buy pieces of this system. The credits then go to their house. So this has been all set up in New York now for a few years. In our particular one, you're buying a piece of the system. Some of the bigger ones, they will actually just sell you kilowatt hours. So you just buy the kilowatt hours from them. And you can do that as long as you're in the same territory, the same utility territory as where the thing is hosted. So that's really starting to happen in New York. Okay, so just a little summary of some types of systems. We've got your standalone, so those are usually small, usually 2 or 3 kilowatts for camps and cabins or your school in Haiti. There's residential grid ties. Those typically are 5 to 25 kilowatts. They're getting bigger now because people are going to air source heat pumps, which need electricity. They are buying electric vehicles. So while our sort of typical system size used to be maybe 7 kilowatts, now it's double that, and a lot of people are putting in 10, 12, 14, 20 kilowatts if they have the room. Commercial, small commercial, those are sort of 25 to 750 kilowatts, and we're seeing there is apartment buildings are starting to get into putting solar on their rooftops to reduce the load in the building, or serve the load in the building partially from solar. Large commercial grid ties, those are like what's on schools. So those usually serve multiple buildings, or a very big building. There's getting to be more of those. And community solar can serve many customers. So typical community solar might serve anywhere from 10 to 100 customers from one site. And then there's the solar power plant. And solar power plants, they're selling their electricity on the open market just like any other power plant. One of the difficulties we have in New York, and some other places have this, we have a very old grid. And we don't have high capacity lines in very many places in New York. So you can't just build a power plant anywhere. You got to look and see. The utilities that publish these maps now, you got to look and see where there's capacity to host a power plant size solar array, right? We have landowners calling us up saying, oh, I've got 20 acres. I want to put a big solar power plant up here. Well, usually the capacity on the lines is not big enough out in the country. So there are companies now that are kind of specializing in the bigger systems. We are still working the smaller systems, or the residential, small commercial, up to 750 kilowatts. And we feel this is important because we're building a distributed generation system. The internet is a distributed computer system, or computing system, the internet. And as we know, when you have distributed systems, they are more robust against problems. If you have a very centralized system, if somebody takes down your one big power plant, you have power outage all over the map. But if you have distributed systems, one can go down and it doesn't have much of an effect on the whole. So distributed generation is really important for making our grid more robust, making it safer against, it's more secure, safer against problems of various kinds, and it's going to lead to fewer power outages. Because power outages, people don't think about this, but if you have a big power outage, like some of you might remember, I think it was in the early 2000s, there was a huge power outage in the East Coast that started with a power plant in Ohio, and that power outage, it cost at least $8 billion. Okay, so these things are expensive. So I feel like it's important to continue to have some incentives for the smaller systems. Eventually, they won't need them either. But right at the moment, they're going faster. We're getting more of them installed because we have incentives. There's grant money from the state right now still available for those. There's a federal tax credit, and there's a New York State tax credit for residential systems, and we still have net metering. Some of these things are going to change. So the federal tax credit is going to go down. The grant money from NYSERDA goes down over time. They have different pots of money, and when one gets used up, then the grant is lower. Net metering is going to be changed sometime in the next year or two. So things do change with the incentives. The good news is that the cost of solar continues to go down. At least the solar panels, those costs continue to go down. Here's where we're at right now, kind of with costs. So for residential, we're at $2.50 to $4 a watt installed. That's so something for your house, whereas commercial is a lot cheaper because it's bigger. So, and all of these solar costs way cheaper than nuclear. You want to install a nuclear power plant, $7 a watt at least, and then you got to buy fuel, and then not only that, you got to figure out what to do with the spent fuel later. So nuclear power, I used to be pretty hot on nuclear power. That's sort of part of my background, but it has a lot of issues. It's you have to separate the nuclear power business from the nuclear weapon business. That's not so easy. There's the mining of uranium, which I've come to realize recently is harming communities. That's a problem. There's disposal of spent nuclear fuel, which it's not that you can't figure out how to do it. It's just very expensive and no one wants to pay. So it has its little issues. Which I was at a home show. This is a number of years ago. I'm at a home show and I'm talking to a prospective customer. And finally he says to me, well, I got to admit that I work for a nuclear power plant. And I said, well, I do too. It's just that my nuclear reactor is a safe 90 million miles away. And there's no spent fuel problems and no proliferation problems. You laugh, It's true. The sun is a giant nuclear reactor and it's shedding a lot of energy on us for free. So why don't we use it? All right, so a couple of last things here before we go to some questions. Let's see. I think I'm going to go to what's new and what's hot. What's new and what's hot. So energy storage, we talked a little bit about that before. Energy storage has become easier, simpler, and cheaper. Right now, we are installing Tesla Powerwalls. Tesla Powerwalls have an inverter built into them, so there's not a lot of complicated hardware to install. It's a nice, clean box that sits on the floor next to your circuit box and feeds into it. When your utility power goes down, you can then power your loads from your battery. So that's great, especially if you live in a place where you have power outage on a regular basis, which are places that have that problem. So the other good use of storage is places that cannot do net metering. Right now, we don't have that problem in New York, but we're anticipating that's going to come up. There are a few places in New York that do not do net metering, such as where I'm standing right now in the Endicott Municipal Light District. They are not obligated to do net metering. So if you can't do net metering, you can store your electricity in a battery and use it at night. So that's another good use for batteries. Another thing that's not really new, but it's interesting. Certainly, it's gotten more press lately, again because of Tesla. Tesla has been talking about solar roofing like it's a new thing. Well, it's not really new. We installed unisolar solar roofing in 1997 on this house over in Odessa, New York. It's still working. Nowadays, well, let's see, in 2004, well, that's quite a long time ago already, we installed sun slates that are made in a factory in New York. They look like slates, and they have lifetimes like slates. They have like a 50-year warranty. And now we are installing certainteed solar roofing, which so this is roofing that is roofing. It's in place of shingles. It doesn't go on top of shingles. It's in place of shingles. So solar roofing is up and coming. There's starting to be solar-powered electric vehicle charging stations. We installed, it wasn't this fancy. This is kind of a pretty one. It's a little more expensive, but we did install a pole-top solar array for the electric vehicle charging station up in Syracuse. All right, so I'm gonna end there and just remind you that when there's a huge solar energy spill, we call it a nice day. And I'm going to stop my screen share.
All right.
Question.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Gay. Let me go back here to get the two of us in here. That was super, and I've got a whole bunch of questions myself, but we're going to go to the chat first. Alex was asking, has ETM participated in the Living Building Challenge at Nuthatch Hollow, or if not, do you know about that?
We have not participated in that one, but we have installed a couple of solar arrays on another I believe it's Lime Hollow on their buildings. So. But we haven't done anything with that one in particular. So.
Douglas asks, where are the solar panels made that you install? And what fraction of the panels that are installed in the U.S. are actually made in the U.S.?
Oh, well, there's kind of bad news there. When I first started, probably 60 or 70% of solar panels were made in the U.S. But the U.S. failed to use what we make. We poo-pooed it, and the manufacturing left. Okay, so first it was Japan. We got a lot of manufacturing there. Then Europe. So Germany had a lot of manufacturing. And then in the mid 2000s, China jumped into the game. And they are a powerhouse of manufacturing. So today, a lot of almost all the solar panels that are used today in the U.S. are made in China. There's a few other places like India. So we have a supplier that we use that they're made in India. But there's been effort to get solar manufacturers to come back to the U.S. Here's the problem. There are factories in China that are making 12,000 megawatts per year of solar panels. That's 12 gigawatts, all right? U.S. investors, they don't get it. Some solar manufacturer comes to them and says, we want to set up a solar manufacturing plant and make solar cells and solar panels in the U.S. And they can get investment for maybe 300 megawatts. Well, if you build a factory making 300x of anything, 300 somethings, and you've got to compete with a factory that makes 12,000 of those somethings, you're not going to win.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So I hope this changes.
Yeah,
I'm hopeful. And actually I've been promoting, this battery factory because we now have another opportunity with the batteries to build battery factories in the U.S. to serve the need, mostly of electric vehicles at this point, but also of, energy storage for renewables. And we could very well blow it. I'm really hoping we don't.
All right. All right. We're going to dive into some of the physics and chemistry here. GH Fear asks, do you prefer mono or polycrystalline panels? And what's the real difference between them physically and in terms of efficiency?
Well, nowadays we're using mostly monocrystalline. They are the most efficient. Okay, so monocrystalline. Now, they are probably not a huge difference, but they can be 4 or 5% more efficient than polycrystalline. Polycrystalline tends to, in the past, what happened was polycrystalline was less expensive because to grow a single crystal is a pretty tricky business compared to polycrystalline. So polycrystalline was less expensive, and I think what's happened is, again, that mass production factor has reduced the difference so much that a lot of panels now are monocrystalline. That's mostly what we use. There are some that are really super efficient. There's some that are 22% efficient now at converting light to electricity. And so if people have real constraints on their roof space, we'll recommend those. You can get more watts per square foot basically on those.
Yeah,
so
you had commented the size of the array that we have up here at Kopernik is again, when it was put in, it was a 4 kilowatt array, and you said using today's technology it would be 8 or something north of that for the same.
I think the solar panels you have up there are about 10% efficient. And they're polycrystalline, actually. They're polycrystalline.
All right.
You can see the crystals in them.
Very cool. So interesting, as I go around on vacations and stuff, I always keep my eye out, and I say, oh, there's a solar panel, or there's a wind turbine, and I've noticed up in Vermont, many of the PV arrays that are there, in the rural areas, are actually on motorized mounts, and so I imagine what that's doing is it's basically following the sun and trying to sort of, because normally if you've got a static array, you're going to get sort of a bell curve on a if you have sun the whole day, you get a bell curve response on how much power you're generating, and these motors are supposed to be trying to flatten that out, if you will. So what is your thought and comments, and do you see much of that or call for much of that?
Well, so when we first started way back in the mid 90s, we ran into some systems that had those, and they were all broken. Oh. Those require maintenance. Yeah. You're taking a thing that is a fundamentally non-moving thing, and you're adding a moving part to it, and therefore you have to do maintenance on it regularly. They're called trackers. Right. They do increase your production because you get more production when the rays of the sun are perpendicular to your solar panels. So if you can point right at the sun all the time, then you're going to get more out of it. However, in New York, we have so many days where there's clouds floating in the sky. I mean, we've got a lot of irradiance, but we have a lot of days where there's clouds floating in the sky. And what that does is it reduces the gain you get by having a tracker. So in New York, you're probably only going to get 10 or 15% more out of your array by having a tracker. When solar panels were really, really expensive, that made sense to do it. But now they're so cheap that it's really hard to justify because the trackers are still more expensive, but the solar panels are really, really cheap. So it's just easier to add more panels and not have moving parts, at least in New York. Now, you go down to the Southwest where you have many, many days with no clouds in the sky, then you see more trackers. Because once again, you can get 30% more out of your array when you're in that situation.
Right. Let's see here. We got another question here. What would it cost a typical home owner to convert heating and AC from gas to electric?
Well,
it depends on
as
the
far
house,
as there's two pieces to that. One is converting your heating system. So putting in an air source heat pump. I know when I did this on my house, I'd say the total cost of that conversion was around $8,000. I have a 3-bedroom house. Okay, so it's kind of like getting a new heating system. It'd be like getting any new heating system. And then there's the cost of the electricity versus what you were paying for gas, and that's where even if you don't have solar electricity, the heat pump uses so much less electricity than, say, electric resistance heating that your cost to run it is about the same. Okay, so even if you didn't have solar, and we also found this at our church, a ground source heat pump is even better. So at our church, we put in a ground source heat pump, and it's actually saving us more than we expected. So we got to pay a bigger electric bill, but now we have no gas bill to heat the place. So it's really quite amazing. That's the nice thing about the heat pumps over, say, just regular electric resistance heating.
Right.
So that's, and you know what we do for that is we come, we look at your house. I mean, obviously it depends on how big is the house, how many rooms are there, how many indoor units you need, a lot of. So we come and we actually look at all that and then give you a quote for each situation.
All right. You have another question about what type of battery chemistry would you recommend?
Well, at this point, it kind of comes down to what's available, you know, what's readily available. And what's happened is because of electric vehicles, the lithium-ion batteries have really taken over. You know, that's what's available. There's some variations on that theme. There's a couple of different kinds of lithium-ion batteries. I know there's a company, it's called Blue Ion. They have a little bit different chemistry, and their battery has more cycles in it. You know, so it's a longer lived battery. However, it's also more expensive. So that's the other thing is I've got people now looking at, well, let's convert what did have lead acid batteries to lithium ion batteries for, like, I have a little golf cart thing that has lead acid batteries. I want to convert it to lithium ion. Well, start looking at the cost of those things, and they're still pretty expensive for things like that.
Right.
But by the time you get to something for your house backup, amazingly, for that many kilowatt hours, the cost isn't a lot different. You know, once you get to something big enough, it's not a lot different. And then for your electric vehicle, the thing about that, the cost of electric vehicles, they're still a little more. Would you say they're still a little more than other kinds of cars? I think they are still a little more expensive, but they're coming to parity pretty quick.
Sure.
But the thing is that the cost of electricity, even if you buy it from NYSEG, is 1/3 of the cost of gas per mile.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So imagine, instead of paying $3 a gallon, imagine paying $1 a gallon. You know, it's like that.
Right.
So you got to consider that too.
Yeah, and then you throw, you know, if you got solar panels on your house, you're filling, filling your tank for free, or essentially. Very good. Now, it's interesting. Like, I've seen it up here at Kopernik. In the wintertime, you know, when there's snow on the array, obviously there's no power generated. But it seems like I've seen it, you know, on solar panel systems that all of a sudden, you know, you have a whole lot of snow on the array, then all of a sudden, boom, it just all comes off. I call it PV avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything that I mean, I when I go and I look, I see these big community arrays, and I'm wondering, is there any efficiency to going out and actually, you know, scraping the snow off, or does it just sort of fall off naturally earlier than you would think it would?
Well, it kind of depends on where you are, you know, where and how much. Basically, what it depends on is how long does snow sit around. When I first moved out here, people talked a lot about snow. Well, I came from South Bend, Indiana, where we had lake effect to the tune of 3 to 4 feet for 3 to 4 months. All right. Yeah. So when I came here and people were talking about snow, I'm like, what snow? We don't have any snow. We have snow that comes and then 3 days later it's gone. Yeah. By the time I get my cross country skis waxed up, the snow would be melting. So now you go up in Syracuse, different story. They have snow sitting around longer. So there's a couple things to do about that. What we do is we design the system and take that into account. Okay, so what we do is we oversize the system to account for the fact that there's going to be a certain amount of time that snow's around sitting on your panels. It turns out that, at least in New York, the amount of sun you get during the time when there's likely to be snow is very small. So even if there was no snow, you only get 5% of the yearly sun in the whole month of December. Right? So if you have 4 to 6 weeks of snow sitting around, you're only losing, you know, somewhere like 5-7% of your solar anyway, because of the months that's happening in. So we just design it to take that into account.
Sure.
And that, for the most part, that's going to be cheaper than trying to sweep it off, and certainly safer. Don't climb on your roof to sweep off your solar panels in the winter. It's a bad idea. That there might be situations where, like this year we had snow sitting on our community solar array because it's relatively flat. We had snow sitting on there quite a long time simply because we had that big dump, that big 40 inches of snow.
Yeah, I remember.
And it took a long time to get rid of it. So we're gonna think about whether we're gonna go up there and sweep off if that happens again. We might, because our customers, they want some credits, even if it's not that many. And then if you have a big system somewhere, especially if it's a ground mount, up in Syracuse or in that area where snow could sit for a while, then you might consider doing that. But basically what it comes down to is sort of the cost trade-off. Is it cheaper to just make it bigger or to sweep things off?
I also wonder whether, there's a way that you could, I know you can buy this stuff in your car called Rain-X that supposedly, covers the thing, and then rain, you don't even need your windshield wipers. I'm wondering if there's a similar kind of a chemistry that you could put on the array to basically provide a little less friction for the snow to hold on to.
Well, if you have the physical space, you can make the tilt steeper. If you have a 30-degree tilt, the snow's going to fall off more easily than if it's a 20-degree tilt. And I noticed the house down the street from me, they have a 40-degree slope on their roof, and when there's snow, I'm jealous because my slope's only 25 degrees. So I go and I look at their house, their snow's gone off their solar panels within minutes, whereas mine is sitting there for like 2 days.
Yeah. So I would also imagine, though, when you're trying to design, what angle to put the array, you're going to get sort of potentially a double hump, because as you mentioned, you want you get the most efficiency when you're completely perpendicular to the array. But in the summer, in the summer we might get the sun up at 70 degrees, and in the winter it's down to like at 20 or 22 degrees or whatever. And so if you really put it at a very steep angle, you're going to be missing a lot of the summer efficiency, if you will. So what would be, if you're sort of just going for maximum efficiency, what angle of a roof around here would you put it in?
Well, we actually modeled that. A long time ago, and found that about that 25-degree slope is if it faces south, that's optimal if you're doing net metering.
Right.
And the reason is that you're capturing the time of year when you have more sun is when the sun is high in the sky. Right? It's the spring, summer, and fall. So you're essentially capturing more kilowatt hours because you're taking advantage of the time of year when the sun is higher in the sky.
Right. In
the wintertime, yes, it's lower in the sky, but there's also a lot more cloudy weather. So that kind of issue is specific to your location, and up here we have that issue. So now I've also looked at what's the difference between, because people call me up and say, I'm building a house, what should my roof slope be? So what's the difference if I build a 412 roof or a 812 roof? And I can actually plug that into my little, there's a little program online called PV Watts. I can plug that in and see, well, what's the difference in kilowatt hour production if you face south? It's not a big difference.
Interesting.
It's really not a big difference. So I thought, build it however you want. Now it's going to be better if it's not a flat roof. It's going to be better if it's not a 45-degree roof. But and the same goes. Another question people ask is, well, what about east-west roofs? Now for that the slope is a little more important. If you have a shallow pitch on an east-west roof, so if you have a 412 roof, which is like an 18-degree slope, then that's much better for production than having a steep east-west roof. Because if it's steep, then you're really only getting either the morning or the evening.
Sure.
So again, you can put it on the east-west roof, and most roofs around here are not real steep. They're mostly like my house. Just and if you have to use your north roof, then you got to tilt it up to face south.
There you go.
Otherwise, it's just going to be a decoration.
Okay. So Alex asks a question. He says, do you change the wire sizes based on the distance of the panel to the inverter and load size?
Absolutely. Because of voltage drop.
Yeah, IR
comes
drop,
up.
right? Yeah.
Right. That comes up mostly in ground mounts because people want their solar array. I want my solar array way out there in the field, 300 feet away. So then we
And
have
your
to
cable's going to be yeah,
because
really,
of resistance. Because
sure. And another thing that again, I think about this. I don't know why, but again, trying to go for maximum efficiency, and it makes me wonder if there's some materials engineers and optical engineers that could find a way to come up with a sort of a light pipe approach, so that if I've got a flat roof and the sun is over here coming at an angle, that it has a way to sort of take all that all that energy and just sort of do a little banana corner into so that it would finally hit the array. And just wondering if that was something if anyone's ever done any work trying to work on that you're aware of.
Well, there was a company that was trying to do a cylindrical solar cell. So it was like on a tube, and the idea was to catch sunlight from all these different angles.
Okay,
that was a pretty clever idea. And the only reason why it didn't work out is because, again, they could not bring it to scale. They could not mass produce it fast enough to beat the competition.
Right. I mean,
but it was a cool idea.
Yeah.
So
that's sort of a different approach, but yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I think you've done a great job of sort of explaining where we are today. Again, I've also one last question I'll throw out there is, again, I know people can buy these solar systems, solar array systems per se. Are there still companies out there that do leasing, and or have they sort of come and gone?
There's still a little bit of leasing going on. We can still do leasing, but what's happened in the meanwhile is that financing has become much more readily available. And it's generally a better deal for the customer to do financing instead of leasing. So that's kind of taken over. And so it's like when you buy a car, usually you get financing.
Right.
And for years I was jumping up and down about really we should have financing that's just as simple for solar arrays as it is for cars. Well, now we have it. So now if you buy a system, you don't have to come up with a bunch of money. And we have financing situations we can set up for customers, or they can go out and get a home improvement loan. And the cost, the overall cost of the systems is, well, it's cheaper than it's cheaper than most other home improvements. Like it's cheaper than remodeling your kitchen.
Yeah.
For some people, it's cheaper than remodeling their bathroom. So it's very affordable now, and you can do the financing. But leasing is still available, and leasing is ideal if you cannot take the tax credits for some reason. So if you don't have enough tax liability to be able to take the tax credits, then leasing might be a good idea.
Right. It also seems my mother-in-law lives down in Florida, and I'm surprised. I mean, calling it the Sunshine State, and it's amazing how much there isn't solar panels down in Florida. Is that a regulatory thing? That do you know what's going on down there, and why in a place that is so sunshine heavy doesn't do that?
Yeah, it's generally has to do with regulatory things having to do with utilities. It's some places utilities make it too complicated for customers, and some states have really very methodically encouraged solar, while others have not. Some states, like Arizona, which should obviously have a lot of solar, their utilities were incredibly belligerent until recently, when they sort of woke up and said, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We have all this sunshine and solar power is really cheap. So, so that's starting to happen, as some of the more backwards, from a solar perspective, some of the backwards states are starting to wake up and say, like Arkansas, the school I was talking about is in Arkansas. You don't think of Arkansas as being a real progressive renewable energy state, right? But you read an article like that and you're like, the other schools are going, hey, we're going to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Excellent. Well, again, we've had a number of great questions here. I want to thank you very much. We have a number of people commented. Thanks for the great presentation and for your time in putting it together. So we really appreciate your guidance on this. And again, I think one of your early slides really hit home. I'm going to go home and start pulling all my wall warts out of the walls. Is that vampire? You know, the fact that you've got chargers, TVs, stuff, computers always on, and how much can you save by just putting it on a power strip with a switch on it? And if you're not going to use it, turn it off. And but the combination of that plus you're right. You got this nuclear generator. Granted, it's 93 million miles away, but it's always there. And anyway, I think again for our people watching online. Also, I was going to mention yesterday we had our first blood drive up here, and it was actually neat because I actually got a chance to meet a couple of the people that chat on our YouTube chat for the first time. So that was nice to catch up with them as well. And
I should put in something from the Department of Shameless Commerce. Call ETM if you want solar power.
Absolutely, right down on Main Street and in Endicott, and
on 300 North Street, on the same street that IBM was on, and IBM is gone, and ETM is still here.
There you go. Exactly. Excellent. All right. Well, super. We'll look forward to having you come back up here, and maybe we need to talk about what I can do to increase our solar array. I think I've got some ideas. We'll talk. So anyway, thank you all for joining us this evening. Again, we're going to take next weekend off. Mars Science Laboratory camera, Juno Cam. Daniel Krishak is on April 23rd. Victor Lamoureux is going to talk about trail cams on the 30th. Alchemy and Birth of Modern Science on the 7th. We've got Race to the Stars on the 24th. Rocket Fest coming up. So hit our website. A lot of good stuff. Even though we're not officially open, we're trying to stay engaged, and we are really looking forward to having you all back up here. So thanks again for joining us tonight, and have a good night. Remember, look up, dream big, and wear a mask. So long.